Hey everybody, Joe Payne here, your friendly municipal music teacher from the City of Santa Maria Recreation and Parks Department. But we're going to change things up a little bit today, and we're going to talk about something non-musical, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite games, and that's chess. If you don't know about chess, its roots go back more than 1,000 years to India, and spread across the world. And the standardized way that it's played today, that goes back to the 1800s. So a lot of people never learn how to play chess because it just seems quite intimidating. Checkers is easy, of course, played on the same board, 64 square board, but chess has all these different pieces and they all interact in these different ways. And I thought it would be fun, since I'm a chess nerd, to share with you how the game is played, how the pieces all work, and we'll do several videos, but this first one is just going to focus on all of the pieces, what they do, how they work, and why they're important, okay? So if you've always wanted to learn how to play chess, but you just never knew where to start, it seemed intimidating, I'm here for you, here with the City of Santa Maria Recreation and Parks Department. We want to help you learn how to play chess, and so I'm going to help you do that. Let's get started. So, as you can see here on the chessboard, we have two sides. We have the white pieces, the dark pieces, and they fight against each other. And what's the whole point of the game? Well, to figure that out, I'm going to clear most of all these pieces off the board here so we can just focus on one piece at a time and cover the basics, okay? So here we go. So, here we have the two kings. Now, the king is the most important piece in the game for both sides, okay? The king is the whole point of the game. Your job as a player, whether you're on the light or the dark side, is to attack the other person's king. Now, the king is the only piece that can never truly be captured. Well, why is that? Well, if a king is attacked, that is called check, and you have to move the king, okay? You have to get it out of the way. But if the king is under attack, then there's nowhere the king can go, and there's no way to prevent that attack. There's no pieces to put in between it or to remove the attacking piece. Then you have what's called a checkmate, and that's an unequivocal victory in the game of chess. Now, here's an interesting thing. The king can only move one space, okay, in any direction. I'm going to illustrate this with pieces of the opposing side. Check this out. So these are all the spaces that the king can move. I've illustrated it with dark square pieces there. You see that? So same goes with the dark square king. These are all the possible moves for the dark square king. The king has a ring around itself of one piece each, okay, or one square each rather. So your king can move diagonal one square, it can move forward one square, it can move backwards one square, side to side one square, or again back and diagonal. Now, because the king can never be captured, you can never move your king into harm's way. So here's an interesting fact of chess. If you have a king approach another king, they can never enter this barrier between each other because the king covers that square. The king can touch that square, so this square is considered covered by the king. Okay? If I were to have another piece here, a dark piece, then the light king could not capture it because this king is supporting it. But because we have this bar right here, where the white king covers it and the dark king covers it, the kings, they cannot attack each other. They can't do anything to each other. And also, if you're left with only two kings in the game and each side has exchanged all their other pieces, you're then left with a forced draw. There's nothing either side can do to capture the other's king because they're out of other pieces. Now, let's get on to the other pieces. We're going to start with the most simple pieces and then build up to the most powerful piece, which is the queen. But we're going to start with pawns. So I'm going to keep the kings on the board so you get an idea. The kings will start here in the middle, back and the middle, at the farthest away from each other. And if you notice, they're on the opposite color of what they are. But now, pawns line up in front of the king and all the other pieces, of course. And here they go. So they make up what we call the second file. So the rows going this way are called files, and the rows going this way are called ranks. There's been a lot of different ways over the years to talk about them. Nowadays most people use the language, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But I'm just going to keep things simple here. But so as you can see, the pawns make up the second row. Now, pawns are very interesting. They're considered the weakest pieces, and they are worth 1 point. They're each piece, based on how much power it has a different rating of points. But the reason why pawns are so weak is, for the most part, they only move one space at a time. Just one at a time, like this, one move. But also, they can only attack diagonal, here and here. This pawn right here can only attack these two squares. So if I were to put two possible attacks for this pawn right here, it would be these two pawns. It could attack either one of these pawns. And of course, these pawns could attack it as well. So pawns cannot attack the space in front of them, just the front diagonal. Now, pawns can actually move two spaces on their first move only. This is called double pawning. So a very typical, one of the most common opening moves in chess is the king's pawn opening, the pawn right in front of your king. Double pawns. White always goes first, or the light side always goes first in chess. So this is the most common opening in chess. But here's a very common response from the dark side, is they take their pawn here and they double pawn. Boom, you see that? So as you can see, these two pawns here are locked into each other. There's nowhere they can go. This is very common. You see this in chess a lot, where two pieces will get fused, or two pawns will be locked into this position here, and they have to stay there. They can't move forward. Most pieces in chess, unless they're capturing, they cannot move over or through another piece. So this is a bit of a deadlock here between these two. Now, something else you could do is you could maybe, after this, the white side might double pawn this pawn. And looky here, now it's given this pawn a chance to capture the other one. That's acceptable because it was diagonal. Remember, pawns attack diagonal, one square diagonal. So after this, say we did something like this, double pawn, these two aren't blocking each other. Well, you can just push this pawn can push. And so as you can see, from here on out, they are limited to only one space moves. They have to only move one space at a time. Now, say you keep pushing. Now look here, this pawn is locked in by the king. The king, can just not move, and this pawn is stuck there because it can't attack diagonal, or it can't move forward. It can only attack diagonal, and the king isn't on any of these spaces, so the king isn't being threatened right now. The king can just hang out, chill, and let that happen. Now, say you keep pushing this pawn, and you know what? And say this king isn't taking it seriously. Maybe he just moves this way, and that would be a dumb move. And then this king takes this pawn because it's right there in front of him. Remember, the king can move, any one square away from itself. So boom, it takes that pawn. This pawn moves, and now once your pawn gets to the back file of the other side. So in this case, a dark square pawn gets all the way to the back end of the white square side, or the light side. Or it could happen with a light pawn gets to the back file of the dark side. Well, boom. Now this pawn can become any piece it wants. It can become any of the other pieces. From most people choose a queen because it's the most powerful, but there's all these other choices. So now let's get on to the rest of our pieces, okay? I'm going to put the kings off the board just so we can focus on the other ones for a bit. So we're going to start with the bishop, all right? The bishop is a lot of fun. So when we start out, in fact, you know what? I'm going to keep the kings on the board so we can understand this a little better. So when we first start, each side has 2 bishops, and they're on either side of the king and queen. We'll get to the queen in a bit. But this is really interesting. The bishops are limited in that they can only move diagonally, okay? So right now, the only way that this white square bishop can move is illustrated by these white pawns, these light pawns here, okay? You see, the bishop can only move diagonal, right? This one right here is called, and this is interesting, the bishop is the only piece in chess that does not change the color of square that it's on. You have a dark square bishop and a light square bishop, either side. Light square, dark square. If we were to illustrate where this bishop can go with pawns, this is just showing you the possible moves that either bishop on this side can have. So you have your dark square bishop and your light square bishop. Boom, it can go to all these dark squares diagonally or all these light squares. This one goes to all these dark squares. Same goes for the other side, right? They have the same situation, the other bishops. Look at that. So you have your light side light square bishop, boom, boom, and your dark side dark square bishop. You see how that works? They can only move diagonal. So it's the bishop is often, and notice how they can attack or move as far or as close as they want. So you could have your bishop and you could move it 1 square, and now it's opened it up to this area and this area. You could have this bishop and you can move it all the way here. They can go as far or as close as they want. They're not limited by the number of squares they can do in one move. They just have to be along the diagonals. See that? So here's one. Boom, like that. Now here's an interesting thing. If I take this dark square bishop and I move it here, what have I done? Check. I've checked the king here. Remember, the king is the most important. The king can't be under attack. If I check the king and nobody can do anything about it, I have to move. Or I could move this bishop in between, and now there's nobody protecting this bishop, so you could do a trade. This bishop takes this one, and then this king takes that one. You see that? That's a very common thing you see in chess, is what's called a trade. All right. Now, next, we're going to look at the knights. Sometimes called, some people call them horses, but the knights here, so they start on this second to last square on either side, and you can see I like to have my knights facing in opposite directions, so you can just kind of see their little horsey faces there, and obvious they're knights. Now, the knight is a really interesting piece. Why? It's because it's the only piece in chess that gets to move over other pieces. So often when we start chess, a game of chess, you have all this row of pawns, right? Up above, or up in front, and you have this row of pawns, right? Now, we just talked about how the bishop, when the bishop starts, it has a diagonal, but it's blocked in by pawns. If you double pawn this first one, now you've opened up this diagonal for your bishop to come out. Now, that isn't the case with the knights. The knights can actually jump over other pieces. They're the only piece that gets to do that. That's what makes knights a lot of fun and very interesting. Now, how do knights move? So, I had this explained a few different ways growing up, and some of them were a little helpful and some more confusing. I used to hear it was an L move, and you have 2 spaces and then over 1, or 2 spaces and then over 1. So you can see the knight can move 2 spaces and then over 1. But then I heard it explained a different way, which is the kind of the wheel. And the way it works is a knight, when the knight moves, it will always move to a different color. If it's on a dark square, it's going to end up on a light square. If it's on a light square, it's going to end up on a dark square. And this is best illustrated by this. Check this out. So if we think of the L technique, or the L explanation rather, of how knights move, you can see that there's 1, 2, 1, 1. 1, 2, 1, 1. 1, 2, 1, 1. 1, 2, 1, 1, right? But the way I like to think about it is that it's like a wheel, okay? And these here are the spokes of the wheel. These lines here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then here is the wheel itself. So this shows you that a knight in the middle of the board is much more powerful than it is on the edge of the board. Okay, there's an old saying, a knight on the rim is dim or grim because you limit its power. Check it out. If I move this knight over just one here, say he was here, now all the spokes and the wheel have to move. Notice I went to a light square, now they're all dark squares, and look, I have 2 less possible positions. Remember, I'm just placing pawns to show you where it can move. And if I have it all the way on the edge here, then we've really limited the knight, right? So that's why when you start out in a game of chess and your knight is here, it only has 3 possible moves in that first part. And so you need to get your knight up off the back of the board and into the game. We'll talk about that more in my next lesson when I just talk about how we begin a game of chess. So that's how the knights move, and again, the knight is the only piece that can hop over other pieces. You know, say I have the white king here, right in front of the knight, and I could even have a couple white pawns creating this solid row in front of this knight. The knight can still hop over them and land on one of the pieces. Remember, over 2, down 2, over 1, you know, the spokes of the wheel. He can go back, he can go forth, and that's the other thing. The knight and the bishop, they can go backwards, forwards, they can go in any direction they want. I forgot to mention earlier, pawns can only move forwards. They're limited by that. They're the only piece that can only move forwards. All the rest can move back or forth if they want. Now, we're almost there. I hope this isn't too convoluted, everybody. Hang in there. Now we get to some of my favorite pieces, the castles, sometimes called rooks, okay? And they end up on either end in the beginning. And they're very interesting because they can only move in straight lines. So if I have a castle right here, then it can move in a straight line all the way forward, all the way back. You know, the whole board. They can go across the whole board if they want, but not just left and right, or not just forward and back, but right and left as well. So they really, if you have a castle, you are able to go all the way forward, all the way back, side to side, and yeah, and same with the black square one. You know, you can reach all the way across. If I was here, right, I could move all the way down here, and this would be a check on this king. And, you know, the king would have to move, right? And you see this castle over here, he could take that castle. Something as simple as that, right? So the castles are very interesting. They're very strong when you link them together. You see this? So you notice how you get 2 of each type of piece. 2 bishops, 2 knights, and 2 castles. And that's because, you know, each side gets 2 of each, but they can also work together, and you can have all your pieces work together. Of course, that's part of the game, but you can see how 2 castles can link up and they protect each other, even from all the way across the board like this. Now, let's talk about the queen. So the queen starts out right next to the king in the beginning, right next to the king, on the color of, on the square of their own color. So the dark square queen is, or the dark queen is on the dark square. Notice the kings are on their opposite colors. Make sure you always have a white square in the bottom right-hand corner when you start your chess game. That way you know your king will be on this side with the opposite color square, and the queen will be on the side with the same color square. Same over here, white queen, white square, light king, dark square, right? Now, the queen is very powerful piece. Why? Because the queen is basically like a combination of the castle and the bishop. So the queen can move as far as she wants in backwards and forwards. So I don't even think I have enough pawns to illustrate this all. You know, but you can see not only backwards and forwards, but diagonal as well. Again, I'm just using these pawns to show you, you know, the possible moves here. So you see this? The queen can go forward, side to side, and diagonal, but also in back this way too. This way, that way. You know, so if I were just to clear all this out of the way really quick, you could see these queens start across from each other. If there's nothing else here, this queen can shoot all the way across the board and take this queen. Boom, like that. Of course, the king can too. If it's right next to the king, the queen is just next to the king can take it. But you know, say here's your queen, this queen can move here. Boom, diagonal like a bishop. It is now checking the white square king, and something has to be done about that. The king has to move, or you could put the queen in the middle here. But look, this queen can move straight, right? Boom, another check. You put the queen in between, you capture, you got yourself another forced draw, right? We talked about that in the beginning. So, when we start a game of chess, it's very important to note, the king and the queen are in the middle. King on the light square, king on the opposite square of its color, queen on the same. Then the king and the queen are flanked by the bishops. Remember, they move diagonal. After that come the knights. Remember, these pieces, they change color when they move, and they're the only piece that can leap over others. And then on either end, the castles, right? So again, here on the white side, outside castles. After that, knights, queen next to the king, and then you have the bishops, right? And then we talked about in the beginning, in front of them are all these pawns. So there you go. If I did forget to mention it, the pawns are the pieces that can move 2 spaces only for their first move, and then 1 at a time, and they can only move forward. All the other pieces, you know, when you start out, all your pieces are blocked in by the pawns, except the knights. They can leap over. They're the only ones that don't get blocked, right? You could do this. This could be a beginning of a chess game, okay? But more commonly, people start by moving pawns, because the pawns are less powerful, they're more expendable, right? And they kind of get out on the board soon, and they open stuff up. So look, you can now swing this bishop out because it's not blocked in anymore. All these pieces are blocked in, okay, until, except the knights, until, you know, you move your pawns and get them out there. So this is an overview of how the pieces move. This is kind of an involved lesson, but if you've ever just wondered how the pieces work, I think this is a good explanation. And in my next lesson, I'm going to go over how we really play the game. I think I'm going to start with you know, some simpler fundamentals, but from there we'll build on that. So it might seem like a lot right now, but just hang in there. And it always helps to you know, play with somebody and learn it with somebody else, or maybe somebody who knows it just a bit more than you. But if you don't have anybody like that, you can learn it by yourself. There's lots of apps as well. If you don't have you know, a board of your own, there are apps you can download as well. So that runs down the basics of all the pieces. Stay tuned for another video we're going to have coming up soon about, you know, the different stages of the game and how to really play the game. But I just want you to have a thorough understanding how all these pieces work before you do that. Because once we start the game, you have to remember how all these pieces interact and how they work. So, and that can be difficult. But I hope this starts you on a journey to playing chess. Even if you never become a grandmaster, that's okay. It's just a fun game to play. Sit down with friends or family with a cup of coffee or some other comforting beverage that you like, and just take some time, chat, and play this fun, intellectual strategy game that's been played by people all over the world for hundreds of years now. So again, this has been Joe Payne with the City of Santa Maria Recreation and Parks Department. Thank you for watching.